Welcome to AI Savvy Lawyer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the AI Savvy Lawyer with Charlyn Ho, founder of Rika Law. Charlyn is a technology transactions and data privacy attorney who advises companies on artificial intelligence governance, complex technology agreements, and the legal frameworks needed to deploy emerging technologies responsibly. I'm Sean O'Connor, and today we're talking about AI in the real world, what companies can actually implement today, and what still needs guardrails out there. So lots to dig into. Charlyn, how you doing? Good to see you.
Good seeing you as well, Sean.
Companies everywhere, like in every industry, are exploring AI right now. And from the conversations that you're having with your clients, what are companies actually, what are the real world questions they're asking your firm to help them with when it comes to AI contracts?
Yeah, absolutely. So the reality is that the law is behind, as it usually is. It lags technology traditionally, and AI is no different. So it's hard to understand what the quote unquote AI laws are because there aren't too many specific AI laws yet. That's rapidly changing. There are obviously lots of other laws that still apply regardless if AI is in use or not. I'll just give you a couple of examples. HIPAA for healthcare data, that doesn't apply irrespective, it applies irrespective of if you're using AI to process healthcare data or not, or some other form of technology. So really the contract is the primary vehicle that allocates risk when you don't have clear rules and regulations. And in fact, when you're dealing with multi-jurisdictional practices, you maybe even have conflicting rules and regulations. For example, the EU versus the United States have different types of regulations or lack thereof relating to AI. So to answer your question more directly, my clients are kind of asking me, what should I have in my contract? How should I protect myself? What should I be doing when I'm thinking about using AI or buying AI or selling AI or wherever you are in your AI journey? Because like you said, Sean, everybody is exploring it right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've had several conversations about it with other attorneys, and I'm wondering too. There's a big difference between what AI vendors promise. You're talking about buying or selling. There's often a big gap between AI, what they promise in their marketing, and what the contracts actually protect. So I'm curious what gaps you're seeing between the promises and the actual legal protections that the companies end up with.
Yeah, great question. So I'm actually writing a book of the same name, The AI Ready Lawyer, that explores some of these topics because as somebody who's represented large companies and small companies against some of the major LLM providers, I have a lot of experience now seeing what the marketing says versus what the contract says. And they're not always the same. And in many cases, they're not the same. There is a gap. Traditionally, the areas of most friction that I see, if you're representing the customer side, meaning the side that's buying the AI technology, you're going to be worried about data. So how is the AI using your data? How is the LLM, when I say LLM, large language model provider, think of like OpenAI or Anthropic or Microsoft for Copilot. What are these companies doing with your data? Are they just using your data to provide you the product? Are they using your data to train other models or their own model? Are they using your data to improve the current model? I mean, these are all questions that are open-ended when you first start exploring buying AI. And in fact, the promises that these providers offer will usually differ depending on what tier of the model that you're buying. So if you're using the free version of any tool, the default is usually that the model provider will train on your data and you expressly permit that. However, there are settings that permit you as the user to change that default. But if you want to go to a higher level of protection for your data, you're going to have to upgrade to higher level plans. And then if you even have more leverage, which most of us ordinary people don't, but if you're a large enterprise buying the product and services on an enterprise level, you may have the ability to actually negotiate it.
Thinking about that, the you got to pay for the privacy almost. And I have dipped my toe into some user agreements and like, oh, okay, so basically everything I drop in here to figure out this problem I'm working on ends up being, training the LLM to do this same thing later on. I mean, not to get too in the weeds there, but I know in your work, you're negotiating technology transactions all the time. Can you share some patterns you're seeing where, the AI provisions on the one hand that are in the contracts fail to protect businesses the way that they, maybe assumed or expected they'd have?
Yeah, that's a great call out. So one of the things relates to, let's just kind of go on the theme of customer data. So there is this concept of training, and when you don't permit the model to train on your data, there are at least two potential outcomes. One is that the model is not improving, so you may, as the customer, not be getting a better model that actually learns, because that's one of the primary promises of AI, is that it learns about you, it learns kind of your preferences, and it improves over time. So it's a bit of a two-edged sword in a way. If every customer turns off the "I don't want this AI model to train on my data," then where is the AI model training from? It's going to be training on the free version data. And is that sufficient to imbue the model with the quality and accuracy that people want? Because the other issue is hallucinations. One of the other issues, I should say. So by this point in time, most people know that a hallucination is essentially when the model confidently answers something completely wrong, but it says it in such a way that is very convincing. Particularly, I've noticed some of the models like ChatGPT, at least, and this is my own personal opinion, has a personality of a very kind of like overconfident first year associate that sort of just says things. And if you're not the partner that's like really drilling down and really vetting, you may not really realize that the answer is completely false. So that's one of the things that kind of conflict with one another. There's a bit of a tension, the no training on my data versus accuracy. And accuracy may not be that important when you're dealing with something like, help me plan a menu for my Friday night dinner. But if you're using AI in use cases that are much more significant in an enterprise level, for example, help me plan my budget for this year, then it's going to be a different story. Of course, there's always the human in the loop. Everyone says human in the loop, human in the loop. However, the other practical reality that butts up against the contract is that with AI, we can process so much more data. And yes, humans can be in the loop, but humans inherently are limited in how much we can process of large volumes of data. So if an AI produces, say, a spreadsheet with 1,000 rows, we can spot check for sure. But can we go as a human and really evaluate it all? And the contract generally doesn't promise accuracy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that your point there is like the reason we're adopting the AI is to scale the unscalable human, and then the human in the loop then becomes a challenge. I know that you mentioned this a moment ago where around hallucinations and such. I had an earlier conversation not long ago about when a law firm is using AI to treat the AI as treat them like an associate, and that they need to be supervised. And so related to that, before a company deploys AI tools in their products or in their workflows, what legal and operational guardrails do you recommend they put in place?
So typically the guardrails are likely to be more operational at this point than legal, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, that there really aren't a lot of laws that specifically say thou shalt retain data for XYZ period, or thou shalt only use data for XYZ purposes. There are generally a lot of privacy laws that regulate data usage and governance generally, in certain jurisdictions like California that are forward-looking in this respect have passed laws that deal with transparency and training data. However, the majority of the country does not have those specific laws, and we certainly don't have a federal overarching privacy law, let alone an overarching AI law. So as a privacy lawyer, this is how I became well versed in AI, because most of the laws and regulations that so far have been passed have some element relating to data. And when you're talking about data, then it has an element relating to privacy and cybersecurity. But to go back to your question, as far as operational and legal guardrails, I usually look at AI in three different parts. It's a gross oversimplification, but the first part is the input. That's when you're doing your prompts. That's when you're uploading your documents saying, analyze this contract for me, or write this brief for me, or here's the facts I want you to look at. And you're telling the AI what to do. That's what I call the input or the prompt. And then you have the output, which is kind of what comes out, obviously, of the AI model. So that would be the summary, the analysis. It could even be multimodal. So it could be a picture, it could be a song, it could be a video. But in generally, for the legal context, we're talking about written work product. And then in the middle is the algorithm. And so this is where the black box kind of is. Most people, in fact, most even data scientists don't fully understand AI. And that's one of the very interesting things about AI, about neural networks and deep, deep thinking. It's just not fully explainable. There's a bit of a, not to get too far into the computer science, which is not my forte, but there's a trade-off between explainability of the AI's decision making and accuracy. So the more you try to understand a model, the more you try to constrain it, the less actually well it performs. So there is that sort of black box element. But when I think about governance, to answer your question, I'm looking at those three aspects. What do I need to put in place for my inputs? For example, if I have a company, do I need to have a policy in place that says don't upload confidential information of clients? Do I have to have something that says don't put personal data? Do I have to have something that says, there's different tiers of data, what I call a data taxonomy? Certain organizations have this where they have something like labels based on sensitivity, and based on the sensitivity, if it's confidential, highly confidential, there's going to be a different level of care applied to that data. So that's the kind of input side of things. And then you also want to consider, it's a very long answer, but you also want to consider what contractual rights, not just what legal rights you have in terms of what you're allowed to put into the AI under law, but what contractually have you committed to your customers, to your partners? Are you allowed to use, for example, if I received a contract from a client, am I allowed to just put that contract into AI? It depends on the client, actually, and what my engagement letter says. So I have to have those guardrails. And then in the middle, I don't really have much control over the LLMs because I'm not building the foundational models. But if I understand what they do and I understand the technology behind it, that gives me more agency to decide what is appropriate for this AI to do and what's not appropriate. And if you're more sophisticated, I'm actually developing an AI product now, a legal AI tech product. And if you can actually code, then you obviously have a lot more input and sway over that middle, that kind of algorithm piece. And then the final piece is the output. The output seems to be the easiest. Oh yeah, let me just take this output and do what I want with it. But the question is, what are you allowed to do with it? So what do the terms say for if you sign up with OpenAI, if you sign with Claude, like what are you allowed to do with this output? But also you have to be aware that this output has been influenced by other people's input. And so there's a copyright infringement risk. Is this something like, let's just pretend I said, write me a song about a little girl that's celebrating her birthday. And it comes up with some rendition that is very similar to Happy Birthday, although that might be public domain now. But, just for the example, let's pretend there's copyright issues. And if I go and put that on Spotify, I might have some copyright issues. So these are the things that you need to think about, and that's the methodology I think about them in.
Yeah, I mean that's why we're here. It's complicated.
Yeah.
That's for sure. And you touched on some of this. I'm wondering if I want to give you a chance if there's a couple other points you want to make, but the AI tools process, it processes, interacts with business data in ways that, many companies, and as you said, scientists themselves don't fully understand. What should companies know about how these systems handle data, and what does that mean for their contracts and privacy obligations? Are there just a couple of key things you think they should be on the lookout for?
Absolutely, absolutely. So there's the few things that at the very highest level that people should understand. One is, what actually are you buying when you're signing up for ChatGPT or signing up for Claude? Because most lawyers, I wouldn't say all lawyers, but most lawyers are interacting, when you say AI, they're thinking about ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot. The reality is there's actually many, many, many other kinds of AI and machine learning, and they're related, but they're two different things. So just the language of AI is something that is really important because, for example, if you're talking to a vendor and they're trying to sell you a product, if you're not speaking the same language, you don't even know really what they're saying to you, and then therefore you don't really know what to put in the contract. So what I usually explain to people is this kind of pie chart where you have machine learning as one subset of artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is sort of the broad moniker of human reasoning that is done by a machine. So simulated human reasoning performed by a machine.
And you're saying that's the pie.
That's kind of like the largest overarching pie. And a lot of people just say AI, 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 and it just means the same thing, when in reality, I think it's important to note that AI is kind of an umbrella term for all kind of robotics that simulates human decision making, software, but the reality is there's no specific one definition. In fact, if you look at the EU AI Act versus the Bill of Rights, the AI Bill of Rights that was issued under the Biden administration, which no longer really carries weight, but you'll see that there are distinctions even in how the word AI is defined. So I think it's important that there's a layperson definition and then there's a statutory technical definition. It's sort of the same way as a privacy lawyer when people think about personal data and I'm trying to advise them on how to handle personal data. Most people say, well, we're not collecting names or email addresses, so we don't have anything to worry about, right? And I'm like, no. Do you have cookies on your website? I mean, almost all websites have some sort of cookie that tracks visitors or monitors things like browsing time. And they're like, oh yeah, we do. I was like, well, that IP address that's collected, that's personal data under nearly all privacy laws. So you may think that you're kind of free and clear, but that's really not the case. I think there's a little bit of that in the AI parlance right now. And then within the AI kind of umbrella, there's machine learning, which is the ability of a machine to kind of learn without code, rules-based code. So in the traditional kind of deterministic software modeling, deterministic meaning you put in X and you get Y every time. So in a calculator, 2 plus 2 is always 4. Whereas with AI, 2 plus 2 may be 5 one day, maybe 7 one day, maybe 1 the other day, because it is generating the outputs based on probabilities. So in the kind of more traditional software, you've got code that is rules based. If you see this happens, you do this. And that's why in AI, you don't always get the same answer, even if you say the same prompt. And you definitely don't get the same answer if you use the exact same question and put it into multiple models. So that's really, really interesting. So I think without I could talk for many hours on this topic, but those are just a few things just to illustrate the complexity of the landscape now, that when you talk about contracts and lawyers in general, precision in language is what we do. Like that's our bread and butter. So if you don't have precision in language and understand what language to use when talking about AI, then, that's a bit of a problem.
Oh my God, yeah. All of this resonates, and I'm only on the fringe of some of this, but of course, just as a general consumer too, we're all, ChatGPT or Gemini or, Copilot, they're all on everybody's lips, and certainly plenty of people are completely oblivious, but we're at the enterprise level and talking about legal issues. There's so much detail. And as you said, the technology is ahead of the law. And I think we see that out there in the news. So, Charlyn, this has been so rich and interesting, and I know we've got more to come. As you said, hours and hours of future conversations, but for now, we're out of time. It's good to see you.
You too. Thank you.
And that's it for today's episode of the AI Savvy Lawyer. If you'd like to learn more about Charlyn Ho and the work her team does at RICA Law, visit their website, ricagroup.com. And if you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe, share the episode, and even leave a review so more leaders can learn how to build and use AI responsibly. There's lots more to come. I hope you'll tune in for it. I'm Sean O'Connor. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.